You're sitting there, looking at your banking app, and you finally managed to scrape together a few $1,000s. Maybe it's $2,000, maybe it's $3,000, and you're staring at it thinking, okay, I'm supposed to invest this. But then you look at the people on YouTube, or you read the financial blogs, and they're talking about having $100,000 invested, or $1 million portfolio, and suddenly your little $3,000 or $4,000 just feels meaningless. Like, what is $3,000 actually going to do? You buy a couple of shares of an index fund, and the market goes up 2%, and you made $60. You could have made that delivering pizzas for an afternoon. It feels almost silly to even try. You start thinking that the real game doesn't start until you have a massive pile of cash, so you just leave the money in your checking account, waiting for the day when you have enough to actually make a difference. My name is Zach, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same financial patterns for decades. And I want to tell you something that might completely shift how you look at that small balance in your account right now. That first $5,000 you invest. It is infinitely more important than your first $100,000. I know that sounds completely backward. I know it sounds like a motivational platitude, like something a financial guru says to make you feel better about being broke. But it's not. It's a fundamental psychological and mathematical reality, and understanding it is the exact thing that separates the people who eventually build real wealth from the people who spend their whole lives just wanting to. Let me explain why this is the case, because once you really grasp this, you'll stop waiting for the perfect amount of money to start, and you'll realize that the hardest, most important part of your entire financial journey is happening right now, at the very beginning, when the numbers are embarrassingly small. The first reason your first $5,000 matters so much comes down to something that nobody really talks about, which is the sheer friction of behavioral change. Think about how hard it is to actually move money from your checking account, where it feels safe and liquid, into an investment account, where you can't touch it without a penalty or watching the market dip. When you have $100,000, you're already in the habit. The system is built. The money is basically flowing on autopilot. You've already crossed the psychological threshold. You've proven to yourself that you can survive without that money. But when you're sitting there trying to decide if you should invest $200 this month or use it to go out with your friends or fix your car, you are fighting the hardest battle of your entire financial life. You're fighting human nature. We are wired for instant gratification. Our brains are literally designed to value a tangible reward right now, like a nice dinner or a new pair of shoes, over an abstract reward 20 years from now. So, when you take $5,000, which to a lot of people represents months of saving, and you put it into an account where you might not touch it for 3 decades, you are rewiring your brain. You are essentially hacking your own psychology. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who was stressing about only having about $4,000 in his Roth IRA. He's in his late 20s, and he was saying, "Man, at this rate, I'm never going to retire." And I told him, "Are you kidding? That $4,000 is the most important money you'll ever make." He looked at me like I was crazy. But think about it. Getting to $100,000 is just doing what you did to get to $4,000, 25 more times. The math is simple. The behavior is what's hard. By forcing yourself to invest that first $5,000, you are building the financial muscle required to get to $100,000. If you can't figure out how to part with $5,000, $100,000 is literally impossible. It's a ghost. It will never happen. So that small amount of money, it's not just money. It's the receipt that proves you can actually do this. And this brings me to the second piece of the puzzle, which is the absolute magic of how compound interest actually works in the real world versus how we pretend it works. When you look at a compound interest calculator, and honestly, who hasn't spent an embarrassing amount of time plugging numbers into those things, you usually focus on the end number. You put in $200 a month, you assume an 8% return, and you fast forward 40 years, and boom, it says you have $700,000. Your eyes get wide, you close the tab, and you go back to your life. But what the calculator doesn't show you is the curve. It doesn't show you the agonizingly flat line at the beginning. In your first few years of investing, the amount of money your money makes is almost insultingly small. If you invest $5,000 and get an average return, Maybe you make $400 a year. That's it. That's the passive income everyone talks about. $400. You can't live on that. You can't even get excited about that. And this is the exact point where most people quit. They say, this doesn't work. The stock market is a scam. I'm just going to keep my money in a high-yield savings account. But here is the hidden truth about those first $5,000. They are buying you time. They are buying you the most valuable, expensive time in the entire compounding curve. Let me give you a weird metaphor. Imagine you're trying to push a giant, heavy boulder up a hill. At the very bottom, the ground is covered in gravel and mud. You are pushing with everything you have, and the boulder barely moves an inch. You are sweating, your back hurts, and you're thinking, why am I even doing this? This is impossible. That first $5,000 is you getting the boulder off the ground. It is the hardest part. But once you get it moving, once you get past that initial $5,000 or $10,000, the ground starts to level out a bit. You hit a groove. And then, as you keep pushing, you get near the top of the hill, and suddenly, the boulder has so much momentum that it starts rolling on its own. By the time you have $100,000 invested, the boulder is rolling down the other side of the hill. You're basically just walking next to it. At $100,000, an 8% return is $8,000 a year. That's meaningful. That's a decent side hustle just appearing out of thin air. But you only get to experience that momentum because you were willing to push the boulder through the mud when it felt pointless. Your first $5,000 is the mud. It's the friction. And if you don't push through it, you never get the momentum. There's another side to this that I think we completely overlook, and it has to do with the emotional relationship we have with risk. When you don't have any money invested, the stock market is just a concept. It's a line on a screen that goes up and down. It's the news anchor talking about the S&P 500 or the Federal. It's abstract. But the moment you put your first $5,000 into the market, something profound shifts. It becomes personal. I remember the first time I put a real chunk of money into the market. I think it was like $3,000. And literally the next week, the market dropped 2%. 2%. In the grand scheme of things, it means nothing. But I logged into my account, and I saw that my balance was red. I had lost $60. And I felt this physical pit in my stomach. I felt like an idiot. I thought, I knew I shouldn't have done this. I just lost $60 that I could have used for groceries. It sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, it was incredibly real. And that was the best thing that could have happened to me. Because that first $5,000 gave me my first real lesson in market volatility. It taught me what it actually feels like to watch your net worth drop on a Tuesday afternoon because some billionaire said something stupid on Twitter. If your first investment is $50,000 or $100,000, and you've never experienced that emotional drop before, you are a massive risk. You are the person who panic sells at the bottom of a crash. You are the person who locks in their losses because they can't handle the heat. But when you invest your first $5,000, the stakes are low enough that you can afford to make mistakes. You can afford to feel that panic and realize, okay, I'm not going to die. My life isn't ruined. I'm just going to wait it out. You are essentially paying $5,000 for a masterclass in emotional regulation. You are learning how to be an investor. By the time you get to $100,000, you've been through a few corrections. You've seen your balance drop by a few $1,000s and watched it come back. You're numb to the normal volatility. That emotional resilience is priceless, and you can only build it by having skin in the game when the amount of skin is small enough that it doesn't destroy you. Now, let's talk about something that honestly drives me a little crazy when I hear people in the personal finance space talk about it, and that's the idea of waiting until you have enough to make it worth it. I hear this all the time. People say, well, I'm just going to save up $20,000 in cash, and then I'll invest it all at once. Or, I'm waiting until I can max out my Roth IRA for the year, and if I can't do that, I'm just not going to bother. This is a massive trap. It feels incredibly logical in your head. You think you're being strategic. But what you're actually doing is leaving years of compounding on the table. Let's break this down simply. Let's say you want to invest $6,000 this year into your IRA. You can either wait until December, save it all up in a high-yield savings account making 4%, and then put it in the market in one lump sum. Or you can invest $500 a month, starting in January. Over a 20-year time frame, that simple act of starting in January instead of waiting until December can mean tens of thousands of dollars difference in your final balance, because those first few months of $500 had an extra 11 months of compounding. When you have $5,000 or even $1,000, the most important thing is not the exact return you get. The most important thing is just getting it into the machine. You just need to turn the engine over. Think about a snowball. You start with a tiny, pathetic little handful of snow. You pack it together, and you roll it down a hill. At first, it's picking up almost nothing. It's embarrassing. But as it rolls, it picks up a little more snow, and a little more, and suddenly it's massive. If you wait to start rolling your snowball until you have a massive pile of snow delivered to you, you've missed the entire point. The rolling is what makes it grow. Your first $5,000 is you deciding to finally pack the snow and give it a push. Don't wait for the perfect snow. Just push what you have. And honestly, we need to talk about the identity shift that happens around this $5,000 mark. There is a huge psychological difference between someone who has $0 invested and someone who has $5,000 invested. If you have zero, you are a saver. You are someone who holds onto money. And saving is great. It's the prerequisite to investing. But saving money doesn't make you wealthy. Inflation eats savers for breakfast. You can save $1 million in cash over 40 years, and it will have the purchasing power of a fraction of that when you retire. When you invest that first $5,000, you cross an invisible line. You become an investor. You now own a piece of the global economy. You literally own fractions of thousands of companies that are out there working for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Apple is trying to sell more phones for you. Amazon is trying to deliver more packages for you. Microsoft is trying to sell more software for you. You are a business owner. And that changes how you view the world. You start reading the news differently. You start thinking about long-term trends instead of just what's happening this weekend. You start caring about things like expense ratios and capital gains taxes, not because you're a nerd, but because it's your money on the line. That identity shift from consumer and saver to investor and owner is one of the most profound changes a person can make in their financial life. And it costs $5,000 to get in the door. It's the cheapest admission fee to the wealthiest demographic on the planet. Let's do a quick aside here, because I know some of you are watching this and you're thinking, Zach, $5,000 is a lot of money to me. I can't even imagine having $5,000 just sitting around to invest. And I get it. I really do. If you are making $30,000 or $40,000 a year, and rent is high, and groceries are crazy right now, $5,000 feels like a mountain. But that's exactly why it matters so much. If it were easy, everyone would do it. If you make $150,000 a year and you invest $5,000, it's just a rounding error. You didn't have to change your life. You didn't have to sacrifice. You just moved some numbers around. But if you make $40,000 a year, and you manage to scrape together $5,000 to invest, you have done something extraordinary. You have fought through the friction of a tight budget. You have delayed gratification when your entire environment was screaming at you to consume. That $5,000 represents true financial character. And that character is the exact trait that will carry you to $100,000 and beyond. The amount of money doesn't matter as much as the person you had to become to get it. I want to talk about one more thing, and it's a little bit of a counterintuitive idea, but stick with me. Your first $5,000 is actually more valuable than $100,000 because it has more optionality. What do I mean by that? When you have $100,000 invested, you are somewhat locked in. You are heavily exposed to the stock market. If the market crashes 50% tomorrow, you just lost $50,000 of real, hard-earned wealth. That's devastating, even if you don't sell. But when you have $5,000, you have the entire world open to you. $5,000 is enough to buy a few shares of an S&P 500 index fund, sure. But it's also enough to buy a small piece of real estate through a fractional real estate platform. It's enough to take a specialized certification course that could double your income at your day job. It's enough to start a small side hustle and buy the initial inventory or software you need. It's enough to buy a few individual stocks in companies you deeply believe in and learn how to analyze individual businesses without risking your retirement. When you are at the $5,000 level, you are in the research and development phase of your wealth-building journey. You can experiment. You can make a 10% mistake. That's $500. You can recover from that in a month. But if you make a 10% mistake with $100,000, that's 10 grand. That hurts. That causes stress. That causes you to become hyper-conservative and stop taking the calculated risks that actually grow wealth. Your first $5,000 is your sandbox. It's where you get to play, make mistakes, figure out your risk tolerance, and discover what type of investing actually interests you. Don't be in a rush to get out of the sandbox. It's a very safe place to learn. So, let's bring all of this back together. Why does your first $5,000 matter more than your first $100,000? It matters because getting to $5,000 is where you build the behavioral habits of an investor. It's where you prove to yourself that you can actually part with your money. It matters because it pushes the boulder through the deepest mud, buying you the most valuable time on the compounding curve. It matters because it gives you a low-stakes environment to learn emotional resilience, so you don't panic sell when you have real money on the line. It matters because waiting for the perfect amount is a trap that robs you of months and years of compounding. It matters because it shifts your identity from a consumer to an owner. And it matters because it gives you the ultimate freedom to experiment and learn without the crushing weight of massive downside risk. If you are sitting there right now with $1,000 or $2,000, or if you just transferred your first $500 into a brokerage account and you're feeling like it's pointless, please stop looking at the number. Stop comparing your Chapter 1 to someone else's Chapter 20. You are doing the hardest part of this entire journey right now. You are laying the foundation. And a foundation isn't supposed to look pretty. It's not supposed to be impressive to look at. It's just supposed to be solid. You don't need $100,000 to be an investor. You just need to start. You need to move the money. You need to buy the first shares. You need to feel that little sting when the market goes down, and then you need to wait and watch it come back up. You need to learn what it feels like to earn dividends, even if it's just $2 a quarter. You need to see that money start to work for you, even if it's only working a little bit right now. Because once you cross that threshold, once you get that first $5,000 in the market, something clicks. You realize it's real. You realize the math actually works. And the drive to get to 10,000, and then 20, and then 50, it starts to feel almost effortless compared to the mental gymnastics it took to get that first 5. Look, building wealth is a long game. It is a decades-long process of making smart decisions over and over and over again. And it's easy to get discouraged when you're at the bottom of the hill, looking up, and you can't even see the top. But I promise you, the momentum builds. The snowball gets bigger. The boulder starts to roll faster. And one day you're going to log into your account, and you're going to see that your balance has crossed a massive milestone, and you're going to realize that none of it would have been possible if you hadn't decided to take that tiny, embarrassing, incredibly difficult first step. So take the step. Push the boulder. Pack the snow. You've got this, and it starts right now.